This is a short video about the impact of Brexit on UK law. I'm going to try to answer two questions. First, what's the status of EU legislation and case law in the UK now that we've left the EU? And second, could any of this change in future? Let's start with the status of EU legislation following Brexit. The short answer is that for the most part, EU legislation has ceased to apply in the UK. But as is often the case with short answers, that statement has the potential to be a bit misleading. First of all, you'll note that I said for the most part, and that's because the Northern Ireland Protocol to the Withdrawal Agreement provides that certain aspects of EU law continue to apply there, such as the EU state aid rules and many detailed rules relating to goods trade. But if we put Northern Ireland to one side, does Brexit mean that we can now pretty much forget about EU law? Well, I'm afraid not. And the reason for that is that the UK has brought quite a lot of EU legislation onto its own statute book, effectively converting it into UK law. Why did it do that? Well, if it had simply jettisoned the whole of EU law, this would have left major gaps in the UK statute book. Take data protection law. If the UK government had done nothing, the EU General Data Protection Regulation, or GDPR, would have ceased to apply, leaving a large hole in the regulatory framework for personal data. To avoid that, the government brought the whole of the EU GDPR across onto the UK statute book to create something I'll call UK GDPR. It then amended UK GDPR, for example, to remove various references to the EU and EU institutions. But so far as most UK businesses are concerned, the actual obligations they have to comply with under the legislation are largely unchanged. Now, it may be that in the fullness of time, the UK will want to change its approach to data protection, and it's already consulting on that. But that's quite a major task, and there simply wouldn't have been time to do it before 1st of January 2021. And of course, UK GDPR is just one example amongst many, which is why we've ended up with a considerable volume of UK legislation being retained as part of UK law. What about EU case law? What's the status in the UK of rulings of the CJEU, the Court of Justice of the European Union? Well, for most purposes, the key date to focus on is the end of the Brexit transition period on 31st of December 2020. CJEU judgments made on or before that date are generally binding on UK courts. But the UK Court of Appeal and the Supreme Court are free to depart from those rulings where it appears right to do so, which means there is scope for at least some divergence if a dispute reaches those higher courts. As for CJEU rulings after 31st of December 2020, UK courts at any level are free to have regard to them if they think that's helpful. But for the most part, they're not bound by them, so here the scope for divergence is greater. But despite that, the reality is that when deciding how retained EU law should be interpreted or applied, EU case law is likely to be quite influential for some time to come. Turning to my second question, could any of this change in future? The short answer is yes, it could, because having left the EU, the UK is for the most part free to change retained EU law. And the UK government has been talking about various ways to make it easier to do that. In practice, though, even if the government implements some or all of its plans to reform retained EU law, some poor civil servant still needs to go through it all and help ministers decide how to change it. And there will normally need to be a consultation on any significant changes. All of that takes time, and there will sometimes be pressure from business not to diverge from the EU, because in some areas that will add cost and red tape, not reduce it. So it seems unlikely that great swathes of retained EU law will be swept away anytime soon. Now, as this is a short video, there isn't time to go into all the ins and outs of retained EU law. And once you start digging into the detail, it can get quite complicated. To help you navigate some of those complexities, we've produced a detailed guide to retained EU law, which you can find on our website, and we'll give you the link at the end of the video. As you can see, it discusses each type of EU legislation, whether it's an EU directive, regulation, or decision. It also covers EU case law, general principles of EU law, and rights contained in articles of the EU treaty. And finally, it looks at whether you can still sue for a breach of EU law, which took place before the end of the Brexit transition period on 31st of December 2020. We'll be updating it as the government develops its plans to reform retained EU law. This is part of a series of short videos on different aspects of the UK's post-Brexit arrangements, so do check those out if you're interested. On our website, you can also find our Beyond Brexit portal, which pulls together all our key materials on the post-Brexit legal environment, including our guide to retained EU law. We'll provide links to both at the end of the video. Thanks for listening.